So imagine being forced to basically bankrupt your entire family.
Right.
Just hauling this rock, like literally the size of a house, all the way across the country. And you're doing this just to build a totally impenetrable fortress for, the guy who just conquered you.
Yeah, it sounds crazy, but that is the actual true story hidden right there inside the walls of Osaka Castle.
It is. And when you look at a postcard of a famous historical landmark like that, there is always this expectation of serenity, I guess.
Oh, definitely.
Like you see that magnificent architecture and you have the cherry blossoms perfectly framing those giant stone walls, and it just looks so peaceful. You almost assume it just sort of sprouted from the earth, fully formed and completely inevitable.
It is really comforting to look at it that way. We do naturally view these historical monuments through a very curated romantic lens, I mean.
Yeah, like a tourist brochure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you step into the actual historical record, you find that the reality of how these structures actually got there, it is usually a masterclass in paranoia, subjugation, and just ruthless political calculation.
Which is exactly what we are unpacking today, so welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
For you listening right now, our mission today is to completely change how you see one of Japan's most iconic structures.
We're definitely moving way past the dry dates and those typical tourist brochure talking points.
Oh, absolutely. By the end of this conversation, you're going to understand the staggering logistics, the sheer human suffering, and the surprisingly brilliant administrative mechanisms that actually went into building this massive fortress.
So to really understand the scale of what happened at Osaka Castle, you have to first look at the actual ground it sits on.
Right, the geography.
Right. The physical location itself is basically a timeline of Japan's unification, but it's written in these sequential layers of destruction.
Which is fascinating.
It is. In the late 16th century, as you listening probably know, the three legendary leaders, the ones often called the three great unifiers, they were fighting to bring the whole country under one rule.
Right.
But this specific piece of real estate in Osaka, that was the ultimate prize.
Because, Oda Nobunaga didn't just walk in and claim it, right?
He
He fought a grueling 10-year war just to take this one spot. And he wasn't even fighting a rival samurai clan. He was fighting the Ishiyama Honganji Temple.
Which is wild to think about.
Right. A decade-long siege just to take a temple. What was it about this specific geography that made it so incredibly valuable and, so insanely difficult to capture?
Well, it really comes down to the topography and the waterways.
Yeah.
The site was naturally elevated, for one, and it was bordered by this really complex network of rivers and wetlands. So it basically functioned like a heavily fortified island.
Oh, wow. So it's essentially surrounded by a natural moat.
Exactly. So for Nobunaga, who was a tactical genius, to spend 10 whole years just throwing resources at this one spot, that tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, a 10-year siege it requires an unimaginable level of commitment.
Absolutely.
I mean, we are talking about maintaining supply lines, suffering through brutal winters, and dealing with massive, massive troop attrition.
Right. But Nobunaga recognized that whoever controlled this specific vantage point, they controlled the flow of power, trade, and military movement in that entire region. It was literally the linchpin of Western Japan.
So Nobunaga bleeds his army for a decade to get the spot.
Yes.
But it is actually the second unifier, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who actually builds the first magnificent castle there.
That is right. He turns it into the absolute center of his newly unified Japan. It was a physical manifestation of his success.
Right, but history keeps moving. The Toyotomi clan eventually falls, and then Tokugawa Ieyasu takes over. And this is the part that just completely fascinates me.
Oh, it's incredible.
Ieyasu doesn't just, move his stuff into Hideyoshi's magnificent castle. He completely destroys it and rebuilds a brand new one right on top of the ruins.
He quite literally buried the Toyotomi legacy deep underground. The psychology behind that specific decision is just profound.
Yeah, because capturing the castle militarily wasn't enough for him, was it?
No, not at all. By entirely remodeling the topography, filling in the original moats, raising the ground level, and building an even more massive structure over the original foundation.
Right.
Ieyasu was executing the ultimate display of absolute dominance. It wasn't even about military defense at that point. It was about literally rewriting history in stone.
That is so intense.
It is. The shogunate was sending this inescapable message to everyone. Basically, the past is dead. It is quite literally beneath our feet, and we are the undeniable future.
It is basically like a ruthless corporate takeover.
Oh, that is a great way to put it.
Yeah, like you have a new CEO who comes in, and instead of just taking the nice corner office, he demolishes the entire headquarters and builds a bigger skyscraper on the exact same spot just to humiliate the previous administration.
It is exactly like that.
But so if erasing Hideyoshi's legacy meant building something twice as massive right on top of it, Ieyasu suddenly had a monumental logistical problem on his hands. Like, where do you even get that much rock? And more importantly, who pays for all of it?
And that right there is where Iyasu's political genius truly shines. He utilized a strategy that was just far more insidious than just, hiring some local contractors.
Insidious is definitely the word for it.
He made his former rivals and his newly subjugated lords, the regional daimyos, he made them build his fortress for him.
Right.
The Tokugawa shogunate issued these edicts, basically ordering these feudal lords to provide the stones and the labor for all the new walls.
Okay, wait. I am really struggling with the logic here.
How so?
Well, if I am a powerful daimyo, right, and my clan just survived this brutally long era of civil war, why would I bankrupt myself hauling a giant rock across the country just to build a fortress for the guy who literally just conquered me?
Right, it seems counterintuitive.
Exactly. Why wouldn't I just drag my feet? Tell him the weather was bad, oh, the cart's broke, just generally do the bare minimum.
Sure, that is the logical response today, but you really have to put yourself in the intensely paranoid environment of early 17th century Japan.
Okay, so high paranoia.
Extremely high.
Yeah.
The new shogun is watching everyone like a hawk, and he is actively looking for any tiny sign of treason.
Wow, okay.
So if you drag your feet, you are signaling disloyalty to him. And in that era, disloyalty didn't just mean a slap on the wrist. It meant the total eradication of your entire clan.
So it wasn't just a political misstep. It was literally a matter of total survival.
Precisely. It's a loyalty test,
Okay,
essentially.
that's a loyalty test with a gun to your head.
That is a perfect way to describe it. But the brilliance of this mandate is that it actually accomplished two massive strategic goals simultaneously for the shogun.
Okay, what is the first one?
First, it successfully drained the wealth and resources of any potential rivals. Think about it. If these daimyos are forced to spend their entire war chest and deploy all their manpower into quarrying and hauling boulders hundreds of miles,
Oh, I see.
right, they physically do not have the resources left to actually raise an army against the shogun.
That's a staggering level of manipulation. You basically force them to spend all their gold on rocks instead of weapons.
Exactly. And the second goal is the physical result itself.
The castle.
Yes, the shogun gets a massive, impenetrable, state-of-the-art fortress built entirely for free. He engineered a scenario where his enemies competed against each other to bankrupt themselves, all to build the very walls that would keep them permanently suppressed.
Man, that is just diabolical. But I want to dig into the actual mechanics of that competition because, as we said, this wasn't just bringing a few wheelbarrows of gravel.
No, not at all.
We are talking about some of the largest monolithic stones ever used in Japanese castle construction. Like, some of these stones weigh over 100 tons, right?
Yes, they are absolutely massive.
So how are they physically moving these across the Japanese landscape in the 1600s?
Yeah.
Because without, hydraulic cranes or diesel engines, the sheer physics of it just seems impossible.
It really was an absolute engineering nightmare. You were dealing with immense weight, terrible friction, uneven terrain, and a ticking clock of intense political pressure.
Right, because of the whole survival aspect.
Exactly. The first phase usually involved water transport. So the daimyos would quarry these stones from islands like Shotoshima and the Sio Inland Sea, and they'd load them onto these specially reinforced ships.
Just getting a 100-ton rock onto a wooden ship sounds terrifying.
Oh, it was. Sailing it across the sea and then getting it off the ship without sinking the entire vessel required just incredible maritime engineering.
And once it hits the shore in Osaka, you still have to drag it over land all the way to the actual construction site.
Yes, and that is where the friction problem becomes absolutely critical. To move these massive stones over land, the workers place them on large, heavy-duty wooden sleds, which are called shura.
Shura, okay.
But dragging a fully loaded shura across dirt and gravel, that requires an immense amount of pulling force.
Right. And this is where we get to probably the most bizarre yet brilliantly weird detail I found in the material.
The lubricant.
Yes. To get those sleds to actually slide, they used seaweed. like specifically massive amounts of wet kelp.
It really does sound almost absurd to our modern ears, doesn't it?
It totally does. They basically built a massive medieval slip and slide designed specifically for multi-ton boulders.
That's exactly what it was.
They spread tons of this wet kelp along the path, and the slimy mucilage coating of the kelp acted as a completely natural lubricant.
Right.
It drastically reduced the friction beneath those wooden sleds, which actually allowed the laborers to pull the heavy stones into place. It's just brilliant.
It is a perfect demonstration of the era's incredible resourcefulness. I mean, they observed their natural environment, they understood the physical properties of what was readily available to them, and they repurposed something as simple and abundant as wet ocean kelp into a highly effective industrial lubricant.
It's mind-blowing.
And think about the sheer volume of kelp required for a project of this scale. Entire coastal villages must have been completely repurposed just to harvest, transport, and lay down seaweed for these construction paths.
The sensory details of that are just wild to me. Like, picture the sheer chaos of that scene.
Oh, it would be overwhelming.
You have these terrifying samurai lords, right,
Yeah.
sweating through their armor, completely stressing out over their political survival.
Yes.
And they are just screaming at thousands of workers who are frantically throwing slimy, foul-smelling seaweed onto the dirt just so they can pull a rock the size of a house.
It really paints a picture.
That perfectly shatters that serene postcard image we talked about earlier.
It completely replaces the romantic notion of castle building with the visceral reality of mud, slime, frantic labor, and sheer human effort.
Absolutely.
But as you can imagine, bringing thousands of desperate, directly competing clans into a single massive construction zone creates a completely different set of problems.
Logistics and security, I'm guessing.
Precisely.
Which leads to a fascinating administrative challenge. Because think about it, if I am a daimyo and I just spent half my fortune and months of brutal labor hauling this prize-winning boulder 300 miles.
Right, to prove your loyalty to the shogun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How do I stop my rival clan, who is literally working right next to me, from just rolling my rock into their section of the wall when I'm on a water break?
It was a very, very real concern. When your political survival and literally the lives of your family depends on getting documented credit for that specific stone, you cannot risk someone else taking it.
Right. And the solution to this paranoid free-for-all is still completely visible if you visit Osaka Castle today.
Yes, it is one of my favorite details.
If you walk up to the stone walls and you look really closely, you will see thousands of these distinct symbols carved directly into the rock faces themselves. These are known as kokun, or crust marks.
Right, with so many competing lords working simultaneously, these symbols functioned as an absolutely essential project management tool.
It's essentially like writing your name in Sharpie on your lunch in the shared office fridge, you know? But applied to multi-ton boulders.
That is a very accurate, if slightly scaled down comparison.
You carve your clan's specific logo, like a fan or a circle or star, into the rock just to declare to everyone else on the site, hey, I brought this, do not touch it.
And that analogy hits the very core of the issue, which is accountability. The kokun identified exactly which lord provided which stone, ensuring that there was absolutely no theft or confusion between the clans.
Right, making sure everyone got credit.
Exactly. But if we pull back a bit and look at the broader implications, these marks reveal the terrifying administrative scale of the shogunate's operation.
Wait, what do you mean by that? How does a carving on a rock equal a terrifying administration?
Because it proves that the Tokugawa shogunate wasn't just relying on brute force and military intimidation to build this castle. They were highly organized bureaucrats.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
They developed a complex system to track every single contribution. The shogunate officials were literally auditing the walls.
Wow.
Imagine an inspector walking the entire perimeter of the castle with a ledger, tallying up the specific crest marks to see exactly who was paying their loyalty tax in full and who was falling short.
Oh, wow. So if your clan's quota was, say, 1,000 stones, and the shogun's auditor only counts 900 of your crest marks on the wall.
Then you have a massive political problem.
A fatal problem, probably.
Truly fatal. It really emphasizes how inescapable the shogun's power truly was. You couldn't hide in the chaos of the construction site, and you couldn't cheat the system.
They had receipts.
The kokun functioned as permanent, carved receipts your subjugation. Even generations later, if a clan ever even thought about rebelling,
Yeah.
the shogun could simply point to the walls of his own castle and say, look, your grandfather bankrupted himself to build my defenses. You belong to me.
Man, that is a chilling way to look at a wall. Just your entire family's honor, safety, and subservience meticulously tracked by logos carved into the foundation.
It is incredibly pragmatic.
It is. And yet, despite all of this airtight control, right, despite the massive stone walls, the kelp-lubricated logistics, the intricate bureaucracy, and the total subjugation of the daimyos, the shogunate still recognized a massive vulnerability.
Yes, they did.
There were forces they simply couldn't defeat with a sword or a ledger.
Because once you build an unstealable, immovable stone fortress to protect yourself from enemy armies, you are immediately confronted with an even greater non-human threat.
Fire.
Exactly. In historical Japan, the ultimate enemy for any structure, even one with massive stone foundations, was fire.
Because the upper tiers of the castle, those elegant keeps everyone pictures, those were all made of wood.
Completely made of wood.
So a single spark from a lightning strike or just a dropped torch could destroy decades of labor, immense wealth, and the very symbol of the shogun's absolute power.
Fire was an ever-present existential terror. You really have to remember that cities and castles in this era burned down with alarming frequency. It was the one threat that political maneuvering and bureaucratic audits simply could not stop.
Right, and to fight that terror, they had to pivot away from earthly engineering and project management and basically turn toward mythology.
It's a fascinating shift in defense strategy.
If you look at the very top roofline of the castle today, it is adorned with these massive, glowing golden shachihoko.
Yes, they are visually striking, but their purpose was entirely functional in the minds of the builders.
Right, for those listening, I really want you to imagine looking up at the sweeping eaves of this imposing fortress and seeing these gleaming gold mythical creatures just perched on the ends.
They're quite a sight.
They have the ferocious head of a tiger and the scaled, curved body of a carp or a fish.
And they served as the castle's ultimate fire guardians.
Exactly. The belief was that if a fire ever broke out in the wooden structure, these golden tigerfish hybrids would magically animate and spit torrents of water to extinguish the flames.
It sounds fanciful to us now.
Yeah, but they stand there today gleaming in the sun as this enduring symbol of protection.
What is truly fascinating about the Shachihoko is the psychological comfort they provided to a deeply pragmatic regime. Today, we install complex sprinkler systems, heat sensors, and fire retardant materials.
Sure.
But in an era where you couldn't rely on modern technology to save a burning structure, architectural defense required spiritual guardians, just as much as it required physical stone.
It's almost an admission of vulnerability, isn't it?
Absolutely. The Shachihoko represent an acknowledgement that human engineering has hard limits. At a certain point, after you've forced your enemies to build massive walls, after you've mastered the friction of 100-ton stones, and after you've audited every single rock with a carved crest mark.
You've done everything humanly possible.
Exactly. But you still have to look up at the sky and ask the mythological tigerfish to protect your legacy from burning to ash.
It perfectly bridges the gap between the cold, calculated ruthlessness of the shogun and the deeply held spiritual beliefs of the time. You exhaust every single earthly method to secure your absolute dominance, and then you just install golden fish tigers on the roof just to cover your metaphysical basis.
It is a comprehensively layered approach to defense: physical, political, psychological, and spiritual.
It is staggering when you put it all together. So let's take a step back and just recap this incredible journey for you listening.
A lot of ground covered.
For sure. We started by looking at a piece of geography that was so inherently valuable, Oda Nobunaga sacrificed an army for 10 years just to rip it from the hands of a temple.
Right, and then Toyotomi Hideyoshi turns it into the glowing, physical epicenter of a newly unified Japan.
Only to have that entire legacy systematically dismantled and buried by Tokugawa Ieyasu.
Literally buried.
A monument of enforced paranoid loyalty built on the backs of terrified rival lords who were forced to bankrupt themselves. Walls constructed from colossal stones dragged across the country on wooden sleds, slipping on vast paths of wet kelp.
Which is still my favorite detail.
Oh, same here. A construction site meticulously audited with carved crest marks to prevent theft and ensure total subjugation, and finally topped off with magical water-spitting tigerfish to keep the whole thing from going up in smoke.
When you synthesize all of those elements together, it permanently alters how you experience the space. You can no longer look at it as just an elegant piece of architecture.
It really does. The next time you see a postcard of Osaka Castle, or, if you are ever lucky enough to actually walk those grounds yourself, you aren't just looking at a pretty building with cherry blossoms. You are looking at a brutal masterclass in power, paranoia, and incredibly creative problem solving.
And that actually leads to a final thought that I think is worth turning over in your mind long after we wrap up here.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we know that Tokugawa Ieyasu completely rebuilt Osaka Castle by deliberately dumping earth over the original fortress of his predecessor, Hideyoshi. He buried it deep underground just to erase it.
Right?
So as you walk the grounds today, looking at those beautiful gardens and those massive crest-marked stones, you really have to ask yourself a question. Okay. Are you seeing a towering monument to the unshakable power of the shogun who commanded it? Or, beneath your feet, are you actually walking on top of a massive, elaborate tombstone for the defeated dynasty that lies crushed in the dark below?
Oh, wow. That is a fantastic question to leave on. A soaring monument to the victor or a crushing tombstone for the vanquished. I guess the answer just depends on how deep you're willing to dig.
Indeed it does.
Well, thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today and for letting us unpack the muddy, kelp-covered reality behind your next postcard moment. Keep questioning the history beneath your feet, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.